Okay, I guess we can start. So, hello everyone, and welcome to MetLife Health and Wellbeing webinar. This is Nancy Murad, Disease Prevention Manager at MetLife Golf for our insured members. Today, in the last week of the month of November, which I guess many of you may be familiar with as the month where we shed light on the health of men, we decided to talk about one of the most important aspects, I would say, in men's health and in health in general, especially in 2020, and that is the men's emotional well-being. And with me today, I have an amazing group for that discussion. I'm going to start from left to right, from what you see in front of you. So our first guest panelist and speaker, Mr. Michael Leonard, who is a mental well-being coach and therapist for men and the founder of Any Man Movement. We will hear more from Michael about what he does and all the insights he will bring today to us. Our second guest is part of the MetLife family, Mr. Andrew Stalker. Andrew is VP in MetLife, and he's in charge of the corporate business at MetLife Golf. And for those of you who don't know, I'm part of Andrew's group. And our third guest is Mr. Walid Fazza. Walid is a lead venture capitalist in the region. He's partner and COO at MSA Capital. And last but not least, Mr. Amin Al-Khawli, who is managing director at LRI Middle East, which is the investment arm of the larger and global financial group, Apex Group. I did notice today the audiences or the panelists are largely from the financial industry, probably one of the most affected industries, when it comes to our most stressful industries. But I'm sure the discussion will reflect much beyond that industry. The way we're going to take it, so we will start with Michael first. Michael will be sharing a few slides with us, which, based on his experience with men's health, bring a lot of insight, as you will see. And from there, we will circle as a group, hear the stories of Amin, Andrew, and Walid, and end up with a Q&A for all of you guys who would like to share questions, whether with Michael or the rest of the team. With that, Michael, to you, please.
Thank you, Nancy, and welcome to everyone. So I'm Michael Leonard. So I consider myself a men's coach and men's mental well-being therapist. A quick overview of my background. I'm the founder and the head coach and therapist at Human Elements, and we're an executive coaching and therapy practice with offices in London, Dubai, and Mumbai. I specialize in men's mental well-being. I'm also the founder of the Any Man Movement, and this is where we'll now start taking the conversation. And as a specialist, I conduct courses and one-on-one therapy and executive coaching for men in corporations and for individuals. And we work around emotional leadership, we work around anger management, relationships, and we really help men connect with themselves and others. We hold retreats and expeditions for men in the UAE and beyond. And like I said, I do one-on-one coaching and men's mental well-being sessions for men. I want to talk about some statistics, and they're quite alarming when I sit in these statistics on being a man. And men are more likely to commit suicide than women. It's a fact. In the UK, over 75% of suicides are done by men. And it's men in the 45 to 49 year age bracket that are most at risk. In the UAE, in the USA, it's 70%. In Australia, where I'm from, 75%. And in India, 70%. And this next statistic really scares me, that in India, one person commits suicide every 4 minutes. That's really scary, you know. 1 in 8 men will experience depression. 1 in 5 men will experience anxiety. And men feel the pressure of being the breadwinner, the fixer. We're told to be strong. We're told to be tough. and we're told to be in control. But we often find it difficult to make deep and honest connections with other men, where we often find it hard to show our emotions and show our vulnerabilities. And when we start feeling this way as men, this affects our performance in the corporate environment. Often men don't seek support because they can't afford it or they think it's too expensive. So we created a men's group over 12 months ago. And men's group, and I'll talk more about that in a second, but men's groups are proven to help a man feel connected with himself and others, and it alleviates loneliness. And it helps a man realize that he isn't alone with what's going on for him, that other men are or have experienced maybe something that he's going through. It creates a healthy relationship with being a man, with masculinity, and it helps improve intimate relationships. Our men's groups provide a safe and powerful container for support. So we created this group, and we call it the Any Man movement. And what it is, it's a holistic support group for all men. And we really work hard to help men find their place in the world with themselves, with their family, their friends, and then their careers. And it helps them create greater awareness of who they really are, which allows them to walk in life more connected with themselves, which impacts all parts of their lives. We provide a non-judgmental, a confidential, supportive, and respectful, collaborative refuge to all men. And we just don't discriminate. And our group, our movement's open to all men over the age of 21 who is committed to being the best version of themselves. And we teach men how to help themselves. And the way we do this, we run free weekly group meetings. Monthly, we get together on a retreat for those that want to come. And this allows men to get really vulnerable and to access their emotions. And we run training days on issues that are pertinent to men at the time. So that's my demonstration. So I thought I'd hand it over to Nancy now to take control, and I'll stop sharing.
Not too much control. I'll leave you guys to handle that. Thank you so much, Michael. Frankly, the most surprising stat there that you shared is the higher percentage of suicide among men versus women. Although I'm very familiar with the topic and we're part of this field, I always thought that it's actually the opposite. Particularly that there is maybe a large number of women also who suffer. Again, I don't think the point here is to make a comparison between genders as much as to, if you want, shed light on, as we said, break the silence in our webinar. Okay, so let's start a little bit about, Michael, you told me a quick story while catching up a little earlier. You had an eventful weekend. You work a lot with men and you help them, kind of try to express their feelings through a very, like you said, a healthy environment, an environment that allows you to speak. So today, I think the discussion is really about, with the group, about their stories, an open heart discussion, but also about how can we allow this conversation further, whether in the corporate world or beyond it. We did have, just to let our attendees who cannot see each other, we did have close to 600 registrations today. Always emotional health brings attention. And right now we have, I will have to open it, but I think close to 200 to 300 people here. So thank you all for listening and being with us. I'm going to start actually with Walid. Walid, you have an interesting background. Today you are in the financial industry, but you come from a long journey. And I'm sure the journey has not been filled, I would say, with an emotional well-being and personal learning. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Nancy, and thanks for putting all this together. So my journey has been a little bit all over the place. It wasn't very typical. So I didn't go to school thinking that I was going to become a venture capitalist. I didn't go into investment banking. I actually got into marketing. And then I got into music, and then I got into immigration consulting. And then, oddly enough, I found myself getting into venture capital. And I think there was a driving force for me is my own sort of mantra or inner critic was, I'm not good enough. And growing up and wanting to sort of, be successful and show up in the world as a man, that was kind of the drive that was in me. But it was also coinciding with being the nice boy. I'm the youngest in the family, and I've always been, taught that I should be nice to everybody, and this is aib and this is haram, and you really have to be nice and empathetic for everybody else and put everybody else's emotions and well-being in front of you. And it has served me well in life. I think it got me places, but then at a certain point in my career, it actually became a stumbling block. Because I couldn't speak my truth. I couldn't stand up for things that I wanted. My boundaries were not very clear. And I really had a lot of suppressed anger. And that would seep out in really strange ways. I'm twice divorced. My relationships didn't do very well. My work-life balance didn't work very well. And it was constantly, I have to try harder. I'm not good enough. And at one point in time, I just got suffocated because it wasn't the experience of life that I expected for myself. And I didn't know what to do with it. And then, while the relationships weren't working for me, I went to holistic healing. I did a lot of psychotherapy work. And then I started to access my anger, to the degree that I wouldn't ever just say oof to somebody or like breathe out in front of anybody because it was demeaning. That's the way I was brought up. But then when I was in a safe space and I was able to release that anger, I really found my power. And I got my power back. I was able to express that in very, constructive ways. And it helped me create boundaries. It helped me stand up. It helped me create the kind of life that I wanted. And I started to enjoy life a little bit more. So I play music, I do yoga, and all of these extracurricular activities really helped me balance out my well-being. And that wasn't available to me. And unfortunately, I had to go through a pretty tough road to realize that. And part of my mission is to reach out to men and work with men through the Any Man network and movement to really tell them, listen, you're not alone. Men go through this, and there's no shame in connecting and talking about it, and not being ridiculed for it, because society doesn't allow you to do that. Your best mates, will tell you to, just suck it up. Family is not necessarily the right place to take it. So really, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's great that there's a lot of female empowerment and a lot of development happening on that level, but I feel like the men are left behind, and there really needs to be awareness when it comes to that.
I like that, Walid. I promised you curveballs, you're doing the opposite. So I really like that, honestly. It's not the first time I hear it, because yes, women have been, again, we don't want to do a comparison, but to your point, this whole arena of the non-spoken about peace is really interesting. So what do you think, you spoke about this turning moment in your life. What do you think helped you make that decision to make that switch? Did it come overnight? Did it come as an accumulation of things? What were the factors that supported you there?
I hit rock bottom pretty hard. And it was a decision to want to continue in life or not want to continue in life. And if I did want to continue in life, I had to really make some very tough choices. And that was, divorce. That was, reinventing myself and just really taking it a day at a time. There wasn't this aha moment for me to be able to be like, oh, this is fantastic, and I'm going to go in a certain road. It was really the pain of continuing the way that I was continuing, and the frustration of not getting the results that I want, which was my wake-up call. And then I really just took a step back and started to analyze a lot of things that were happening in me. And I realized I really had to break a lot of chains and a lot of, patterns that I've been brought up with through society or through parenting, and slowly start to reassemble myself back again. And it's a never-ending story. It's not something where it's like, oh, this happened, now I'm fixed, I'm fine. It's not. It's a day-to-day, moment-to-moment awareness and consciousness that men go through. I just want them to know that there is actually a way. You don't have to be suffocating all by yourself with all the stress and anxiety that you're holding on yourself.
Someone is asking you, what did I don't know if you would like to answer it. Usually we don't take on the spot answers, but someone is asking you, what did rock bottom look like?
I have been in the past 9 years from me. It wasn't that I woke. So I woke up really feeling like there's no will to live. It doesn't make sense. All the effort and energy that I put into creating this life has just smacked me in my face. And where do I go from here? And it was a very, very painful and very lonely place. That was what my rock bottom looked like.
Thank you, Walid. We speak a lot about you mentioned something in the beginning around, or maybe we spoke about it earlier, the mask, right? So this contradiction between what we are expected to show, or what men specifically in this regional ecosystem are supposed to show, and what they're really going through. And you mentioned rock bottom, and I guess this is the ultimate contradiction between what you have to show and where you are. Amin, I would like to jump a little bit to you. You are the managing director of a financial institution. How do you deal with the mask? How do you deal with that seniority and having to be yourself?
Well, I like the two men that preceded me. I'd like to relate this to a personal journey and perhaps bring in how important all of this is in the corporate world as well, which at the end of the day is made of people, men and women. I actually started out in IT, probably because that's something, in my day, it was more likely that 80% of attendees in STEM courses would be men. And I think we found refuge in the fact that this was all facts and figures, and maybe emotions didn't matter as much. It was a way of masking it, maybe as younger men. But anyway, I then moved, having got a PhD in artificial intelligence, I moved into finance, which is another sector that, again, is supposed to pride itself on precision, sense of confidence, and certainty. It didn't take me long to figure out that everything was really driven by emotions. And the fact is, most recently, the winners of Nobel Prizes in economics have been psychologists. It's called behavioral economics. I've even had a lecture and had a good discussion with a professor at University of Manchester, Professor Hodgkinson, who is basically saying his research on the role of emotion in strategy. So underneath all the rationalizing that we do, we are driven in our decisions, day-to-day, economic decisions, corporate decisions, investment decisions, by our emotions. And when we build a mask or a story in our head as to why we're doing things based on an outdated model, things go horribly wrong. And we will all relate to this, men and women, how there's a huge amount of, if you pardon the expression, BS in the corporate world. We're trying to budget for next year, pretending we know how to. That's a mask, okay? We're trying to, do projections of figures of how much income we're going to make, or how much a company is going to be worth, and we have to pretend to be certain about it. So there is all this pressure constantly to play the game, and it's affecting everyone. So it affects the business decisions, and it affects people as well. And the only analogy I want to draw before I move on to sort of, again, the personal emotional experience I felt was the world has moved on in terms of just scientifically understanding what drives decision-making, what drives our emotions, what drives how we relate to people. And a lot has happened in the last 10, 20 years. If we're living with an outdated model of how we work, it's a bit like going around the world with a Nokia phone, and the world has moved on to smartphones. That's how much behind you could be. Now, I personally would rather go back to having a Nokia phone and stay away from social media. But when it comes to your relationships, is that the way you want to appear in life? in that level of connection to your emotions, or that kind of outdated understanding of what you and other people are like. My journey at the end of a certain period of finance took me to trying to much better understand people, because that's what drove everything, and that comes down to emotions. I ended up becoming an NLP practitioner and a certified hypnotherapist, and that really helped open a huge door for me. But it only really came home when I joined the Anyman movement and started connecting closer, not to just at arm's length trying to help people, but really to understand personally what drives me. And one last thing I'd leave people with to understand the importance of what it is for health, well-being, and life in general to be connected to your emotions. We mentioned how that's the case in business. If you are interested in your physical well-being, whether through exercise or a food program, you know very well these things fail at an emotional level. I remember being pushed by a personal trainer at some point. And what was the feeling? And now I understood this recently. The feeling I had when my heart was beating and jumping out of my chest was actually fear. Yes, it was tiring, and I thought that with practice I got better at physically coping with it. The reality isn't that. The reality is I eventually got to understand what it's like to be scared of exercising too hard or dropping dead in the middle of it, and I then understood that emotion. So diet programs, eating well, where do they fail? You imagine you're going to do one thing, but the way you appear, what emotions you have in the moment when you eat the wrong thing because you are trying to make up for something, again, is emotionally driven. So the real key to make any of this health and well-being succeed is to connect to what really drives you and almost take your emotions to the gym, practice these and understand them. And that's the level of importance at which we're talking about. So again, perhaps rationalizing it too much, but I was hoping to explain to people the importance that drives everything in our lives when it comes from our emotions.
You did it perfectly. You did it perfectly. I mean, it's actually, let me also share some emotions here. It's one of the stories, I would say, of my life as a public health practitioner, where I feel that, as they say, life is a mindset, right? So life is a mindset, whether you're eating or you're going out or whatever you're doing, it's all upstream in the brain. It starts here. And one of the challenges, if you want, that we go through in the corporate world and in our lives, to your point, like you rightly mentioned, we're still sometimes we look at emotions as if it's the soft element, and if someone is good with numbers versus the soft part, they're missing something, right? Probably the largest space of public health is around behavior change, and behavior change means talking to emotions and the brain. And when we speak to, I noticed something is that when we speak to employers and we speak to HR, and I think praise the role that the corporate world has been playing the last 5 years in the space. There is a sense that when we speak of education or content, as if we're not really doing exactly what we have to. And I feel that really we have to always remember that it all starts here, and starts from educating that mindset, whether through friends or through personal learnings about how we can, improve our lives. I have recently started something called, and hopefully we can address it in the next session, the no diet life. So basically reframing your whole brain about how you eat without thinking of right and wrong types of food. Again, I hope we can bring it later. I don't want to divert the discussion too much. We're going to jump to Andrew. I can see Andrew smiling. Andrew, you are, we work together. I know you very well. On my standard and the standard of many people, you are a successful man. You have a huge portfolio under your belt with the Gulf region. You're coming from a global region. This is what we see. This is what we see from Andrew on the outside. What is the story that we do not know about Andrew?
Thanks, Nancy. And guys, it's been great to be with you again. First of all, I was just actually smiling at the response that Michael gave to one of the questions, which was around, how do you help another man, right? How do you open up and start to recognize how you might be able to help another man? It's difficult. And I get that point, and maybe I sort of will respond to that question myself again, which is a very topical one with my background and my story. So thank you, Nancy. Like the other gentleman, I still do struggle with trapping a lot of my anxiety about being a man and having to provide for my family inside, to the tune that I talk to myself quite frequently during the day. And I think that's quite a common human response. But, you know, I have maybe a fortunate story, and it's tragic in a way. Early in my life, when I started in the business world, my wife and I experienced a tragic loss. And I won't go into the details, but just rather share with you, similar to these men's story, that following the loss, of course, my attention was to two things. One was my wife, and the second was work. And the balance there was destructive as it related to my own personal mental health. And it took me almost a year to realize that I was heading in a direction that was almost unrecoverable. And it was at a time where, you know, of course, my wife needed me most, and the business, of course, needed me most. And I was quite ambitious in my career. So at the time, I took the chance to reach out to a therapist, a family therapist, at first a grief counselor, and then second, a therapist for mental health. And I did that for about 2 years because I was suffering from depression. So although I don't look back now and say I've struggled with depression my life, I certainly can say I experienced it at a moment in my life, and I can reflect on that as an experience. And the positive outcome from that experience, as I look back on it, was that it was an awakening at an early age. And the awakening gave me sort of two powers, if you will, extra strengths as a man. One was the ability to sort of manage life going forward and manage the stresses of life that many of these men talked about, that they experienced, and that many, I'm sure, listeners on the call are experiencing. And it allows me to sort of put a lot of things in perspective. It allows me to work hard, but then balance the time I need personally to get away, to recharge. And it gives me the time to balance, obviously, the other important things in my life, like family. So that's the first thing. And I encourage every man who's listening, if they struggle with any amount of anxiety or depression, to just get that opportunity to get some support from a clinical psychologist or therapist to address the needs. And then the second thing, and I'll go back to this question that was asked in the chat box that Michael answered, it's given me a tremendous power to be able to make myself vulnerable and open to other men. And I have, if you will, a keen observation into men that are stressed and that are struggling. And it gives me an opportunity to ask the question more often, are they okay? And I agree with the question. Many times it's, I'm fine. And several times you have to go multiple layers and take multiple attempts to support people. But just simply saying, okay, you know, we're here for you, or how can we help? Or, you know, that there are professionals that can support you. And in some companies that have mental health programs, use the services that are there for you. That's what they're there for. Those are the sorts of things that I think men want to hear. And we're hopeful that obviously each case is different, that people will open up to those discussions. And certainly this group has found the solution in putting together a group that gives men the opportunity. So that's my experience, and hopefully it's helpful for those that are listening.
Very helpful. Thank you so much, Andrew, and for the honesty and the vulnerability and the open heart sharing of your story. And to your point, I feel that, you know, one of the questions that maybe because it's the shortest and to the point, but also the one I personally struggle the most with with men in my life, from, you know, family to friends to colleagues to anyone I know from the other gender, and I know it's a struggle across the board, is somebody asked, how do you get the courage to seek support? And I think, to your point, Andrew, this group got the courage in a way or another, whether because of their background, because of a specific support of a man, or because their simple survival instinct, they found themselves rocking at a stage where really they have to do something about it. Michael, maybe my question to you, since you work with a few, you know, with a lot of people actually, what could be one thought or one element you share with anyone listening to us about the starting point of the courage? What should they do? You know, there are so many people struggling out there. What should they do? I know if I go today to my dad or my brother or my friend, they will tell me, oh, what is on average, right? Not necessarily, but on average. Where do we start? Where should we start as men?
That's a wonderful question that has 1,000 answers. I think there are many different areas where men can get support. You know, obviously there's our group. So, and as Andrew rightly said, there's therapists who are trained in this area. But in a family context and in a work context, just be aware that a person's going through things. And Andrew rightly said is the first thing to do is say, are you okay? And what us men don't want is that we don't want to be told what to do. Okay, we don't want advice. We want to be listened to and heard and have space held for us. So the first thing to do is just be brave if you're a man going through some emotional troubles, and first of all know that we all do. We all have troubles. We all have things going on. None of us lives a perfect life. You know, I've suffered with depression. I've thought about suicide in my past. You know, and it was scary. But there's help out there, and people do love us. You know, and we try to help men to help themselves to love themselves, and that's probably one of the first things that we try to help men do, is to realize that it's okay to be who you are. One thing that we find in our men's groups is when a man sees another man being honest and showing vulnerability, it gives him permission to do likewise. And that's the power of talk, and it's the power of love. It's the power of, you know, male masculinity, and it's okay to love another man, and it's okay to love yourself. I've probably gone off the question, sorry, Nancy, but you know, there's such a rich question that involves such a deep, long answer. So,
and I think I'll follow up on that. For someone who's been through it, I think that question's, how do you start? I think it's just realizing what is there to lose, right? What is there to lose by seeking some support from somebody? And I think having, you know, look, my experience again, getting independent support or unbiased support from somebody other than, at the time I was still pretty young, so my mother, or again, my wife who was struggling, or my brothers, I felt like that was probably the most important moment in my life. And so I'll just simply put out there for the other men listening, what else do you have to lose? Nobody wants to live a continued moment of anxiety or depression that they struggle with day in and day out. There's no benefits to that. So again, nothing to lose is my view on making that first step.
If I could just share a quick story about one of the guys that comes to our groups, and he's been coming a while, and often he sits in the corner and doesn't talk. It took him 6 months to actually talk. And about 2 months ago, he was really sad, and he had a bit of an anxiety attack, and he said he didn't want to live anymore. He was just had enough of living, and it transpired that one of his close friends had died. On Friday, another one of his close friends died, and he was with us on the retreat, and he was able to break down crying and show his sadness and anger And he came to the group last night and he said, you know what? This has been such an amazing journey that 2 months ago I didn't want to live anymore because a friend died, and a friend died on the weekend, and now I just want to live, and I just want to live, and I don't want to die anymore. And he was brave, and that was brave just to share his story and to embrace his emotions of sadness. And that makes me feel really happy that we're doing something positive here.
So, of course, we can have this more of an open discussion. So I'll just be, rolling. I have a lot of questions on my mind, and I know we're getting a lot that I'm not maybe having time to look at all of them. And I think we did ask this question some time ago in one of our talks, and I always like to ask it. What should they expect if someone is in a place where they are resistant, right? So what should they expect when they go and seek such a support? What exactly did you guys feel when you went into this group? And maybe I would follow with a question. It's interesting that when you say that when we find ourselves among men, it's easier because we're among men. It's as if this pressure of performing in front of the other gender it doesn't have to be, right? And here maybe the question when we're raising kids, how do we raise men, right? And maybe we can talk a little bit about it. So your thoughts on this one? Walid, I see you smiling.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I love this question and I want to take it. I don't think it's natural for men to get together and then just like release their barriers. That wasn't it for me. Because when I'm with a bunch of men, it reminds me of locker room days when I'm going to play sports and it becomes really competitive and everybody's, teasing or making fun of somebody else. And it's really a place where my guard goes up, right? The difference between that being ridiculed or having guy humor circulating is that when you come to these circles, first of all, there's absolutely no judgment, right? So there's a safe space. And what we do is we relax. So we actually breathe and meditate and just stop. Men are running constantly, thinking of a million things, and there's a huge laundry list of things they have to do. And this is probably a place where you come, the phones are not allowed, you put them outside, and you just breathe. You stop, we meditate with a bunch of guys, and that by itself just starts to change, the circulation and your awareness. And then we all just relax, and then one of the men opens up. And that's where the magic happens for me. Because when you see a brother, a man, act as a role model and be brave enough to share a story that is heavy and stressful, it's like a domino effect. It's purely magic. All the other men go, he just spoke my truth as well. And a shift happens. It's a biological, chemical, auric shift where the man just says, holy shit, this is real. Finally, there is something that is not, fake here. And that really brings out the truth of other men. And I think it's the power of men to hold integrity, to hold a safe space, and to support each other that allows them to do that. It's not what we see in society every day. It's not what we see when we see a bunch of guys competing, either at the workplace or on the field. This is a completely different setup. And once a leader steps up and shows that, then you have that, very spiritual circle that evolves. So I just wanted to say that that's how it usually goes.
I really like that. So you're talking, I think, and I really love that because you made me imagine immediately being in a meeting room or a boardroom. And I think you contrasted well. So it's really about having that level of empathy, feeling that it's a group of empathetic people who are not going to judge you. You can be yourself with them. And in my head, the only question that keeps popping up as you're speaking, how on earth can we scale that culture? Maybe we will come back to it. How can we scale that feeling of walking into a meeting room or in a friend's place or, whatever kind of setting, and feeling that we can be ourselves.
I'll let somebody else take this, but I want to say you touched on it from your previous question. We have to start with the younger generation. We have to get them to understand the language and express feelings and make it okay. So you were talking about boys, and how do we help our youth really come to a place where they can express and they feel safe to do it. And I think that's when you're starting to do a generational shift or a paradigm shift in men's emotional well-being.
Yeah, I also think, well, Leonard, I agree totally with that, but also I think it's the leaders of business that need to take ownership in this. And if the CEO is able to stand in front of his team and say, I feel scared, I feel sad, guys, I feel, and show that it's okay to feel, it's okay to be emotional. If every organization can do this, then it's going to start getting across society quicker. I talk to business leaders all the time, and I talk about this men's work that I do, and they say, oh, no, we can't have that in our company, but I can't show leadership, vulnerability. I've got to be a strong leader. And I just think rubbish, this is the opposite of what you need to do. You need to show that you're scared. You need to show that you're sad. And I think when we get this into organizations, this is when we'll start making big change as well.
Just a quick point on what Michael said. Actually, in fact, this misconception that you can't show vulnerability is the cause for a lot of the BS I talked about before, because everybody looks at it, they know that's not how things are, and they realize it's a song and dance, so they keep their mask on and it just escalates. And the best results I've ever had with the teams I've worked with were always where people could sit down and talk openly and honestly and avoid the BS, which took vulnerability for sometimes them, sometimes me, to say, you know what, I know that's what we've been saying, but I'm not sure this is how it is. And it's as simple as that, just being able to step up. In terms of how this, you said how this scales, it scales like anything that takes proper hold in grassroots. How, for example, health, fitness, exercise, even mindfulness and meditation and yoga have grown over the last few decades. The benefits that accrue to people, leading by example, people knowing what's going on, and then making the connection and trying to experience it for themselves. And certainly what you're doing today is helping. And that's one step. But I agree with Michael. I think once people realize just the benefits to themselves and their businesses, if they're in a leadership position, to be able to move beyond this stuck position where they have to pretend, the people know that they're pretending, and they know that people are pretending, and the people know that they know that they're pretending. Once you break that cycle, even at a small group, nobody works consistently day to day with 700 people. There's always a group around. If somebody can take the leadership and call it the emotional leadership and try to get better results, not just for the business, but for themselves and for the people who work with them, which will inevitably result in better results for their business, that will accelerate that massively. That's my take on that.
Thank you. I mean, guys, it's not it's what we're doing today. Really, I'm so happy. I don't know if you can guys tell with all this discussion. We have a lot. I'm sure we have HRs today on this in this audience, and maybe also business leaders. What are some thoughts? Maybe direct thought. Then the next thing you would suggest they would do. I know it's not a next thing. It builds up bit by bit, effort by effort. Until it becomes a culture. But where do you think they should start focusing in their organization? Because I'm a big believer that organizations are a huge scale that together make the society. This is how we're at least built in this Gulf region.
If I could make a comment again, a bit based on my experience and some of those strengths that I gained coming out of my experience back in my mid-20s, I take great importance in a man's need to unwind and recharge. And what I mean by that is, again, if you think about a man, it's often overshadowed that, they're at work, they're thinking all day, they're in this mindset, and then they immediately go home and they have, depending upon their personal situation, a set of responsibilities at home as well, right? Similar to working women as a good example. My view is in addition to the comments that were made earlier about a leader that shows vulnerability and empathy and that listens well, is also to encourage the time that's necessary for a man to mentally reflect and work through their challenges away from work, right? So this question specific to HR. And my view on this is, and I have many experiences where I've had associates who have been struggling through the balance of home and work. And we have to encourage them to be able to get away and turn off what's going on at work, right? So whether that's giving people the time to have in their evening, whether that means staying away from them on the weekend, whether that means when you know they're struggling with an issue, encouraging them to take the time away, despite the fact that they're going to tell you, it's actually better for me to be here. It's not. And so my view, and again, I think is probably a second component, is make sure the man has time to recharge their brain. We know that sleep's important. We know that downtime's important. If they're burnt out and they have anxiety or depression, there's no doubt that that's a negative cocktail for bad things to happen.
I love that. I love that. Andrew, you're somehow advocating for free time. Are you advocating for a four-day week?
Well, not just yet. But I did like what Google came out with, which was the no meeting week.
No meeting week. Beautiful. Yes, a lot of policies, I would say, can change, have to change, and are good to change. So, Michael, you had something to share. I saw you.
I was applauding the 4-day week. I think that we've created this crazy society where it's okay to work 5-6 days a week, and we live to work. We don't work to live. Back to, if I could talk to the corporations question, the HR questions. Companies need to embrace this and help people build emotional strength. Build their emotional muscle. If I can get a plug in, this is what we do. We go into organizations, we help their people build emotional muscle. This part of the world, it's predominantly men, so this is why we focus on the men. So if anyone listening wants to help their male leaders build their emotional muscles, please get in contact, because this is where it's going to change. This is where it's really going to change.
So, thanks, Michael, and definitely, please, we're getting a lot of questions actually on the Anyman movement, so feel free to reach out to Michael if you feel you would like to be part of that group. One of the questions pops up to my mind as the opposite gender. I'm not going to mention the whole idea about women are emotional at work, that historically, I would love to have this word of women are emotional or someone is emotional to be removed from our lexic, because if we're not emotional, we're not human at the end of the day. So there's a long history there. I know it will not disappear overnight, but I love where this is going. One question is maybe the role of your partners that you have seen. What do you think the role of a spouse or a partner they have to play in that journey? Do you think it has to be part of their role, or is it a journey that someone takes on their own as long as they have someone who understands them on their side? What has been your experience and something you recommend for maybe a partner today struggling with someone who is unable to seek help or something like that?
I'll take this. I think up until now, we didn't know what to do with men. A man who doesn't want to talk, a man who's bottled up, instead of going to substance abuse or getting angry or harming people. Very, very hard to kind of deal with that. I think spouses and partners play an incredibly important role. And it's really just about educating that there are ways to deal with this, and we really feel like there hasn't been precedent in the region for men to open up and to talk. And it's been, and I guess that's why we're here. So, the simple answer is just to know that there are places that you can go. There are avenues that can be dealt with. I didn't know. I had to discover it myself, and I hope that we can reach out and make it available to everybody so that they can know where to go. So I think spouses can help with that. I think it's the reason why I'm saying that is because I think it gets really tricky when the spouse wants to try to fix. And that doesn't work because of what Michael said initially. Nobody wants to be told what to do. It's actually a discovery journey, and therefore all you can do is show a path, and then they need to walk it themselves.
I like that. No one wants to be taught what to do. Not just men, by the way, women equally. Yeah. So how do we break that? It's a partnership at the end of the day, and I think, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate on that challenge, that maybe both recognize that there is a challenge within. I think in many of our sessions we speak a lot about communication skills and how to be more about avoiding the attacking the other, and maybe trying more to put it as the us or the me, in certain ways that, to your point, appeal to people versus trying to make them the predator somehow. So, Amin?
Just on that point, I think what we're talking about here is self-communication skills, nothing more. The ability to listen to yourself, and that's where we help people connect to what their feelings are telling them, and then being able to communicate properly with yourself. So if you wanted an analogy of what this is about, that should explain a good part of what this work is about. And I think that also answers your question in terms of people trying to help others. I think that it's useful to show the way, and then it's not that people can be fixed. They need to take the journey themselves, I agree. But if you were to phrase this is a way of helping people to be able to listen to themselves better and communicate with themselves better, really.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you put that very nicely. It's all about learning to actually really understand what you're feeling and what's really going on for you without all the stories, the rumination, the fantasies that often cloud our understanding of what's really happening. And when we know what's really going on for us blokes, then we can actually make honest and more compassionate decisions for ourselves.
I'm trying to take a look at all the questions and the chats. They're coming from everywhere. A lot of interest on, more people joining and being part of the group. Some interesting comment on the alpha male. How can we remove that? Question to Walid: what is the importance of me time in relation to happiness? Men usually work hard to keep others, and okay, I'm struggling to see the point.
Yeah, I saw that one, and I think also to Andrew's point, I like to use the analogy that they use on airplanes, although we're not flying very much these days. But on the safety instructions, it says, in case of emergency, put the oxygen mask on yourself first, so that then you can be able to help others. It makes no sense if you're depleted of oxygen or of happiness or of joy, and then expect to give others in a situation where it's become critical. So, I love that analogy. Initially, when I first heard it, I'm like, oh, how could you not give the oxygen to your child first? Actually, it makes perfect sense. You need to be able to feed yourself in order to spread the love and spread the happiness, and then achieve your goals. If you're depleted, you're not helping anybody, especially not yourself.
Great point. Great point. And it goes back to some of those statistics that Michael showed at the start of the presentation. Have you been getting angry? Have you found yourself, thinking that, you're not happy? Yeah, that's a great point.
Love the analogy. Another question we have from Nina about what advice can you share to help men recognize, this is for the group, how can a man recognize there is an emotional issue? Because life is all about issues, right? How can you recognize it's tipping the point? Or should we not wait for it to be happening?
In here, and then if anybody else wants to take it, maybe Amin, do you? Go ahead.
You can start, Walid. I can follow.
So I think going up to a man and saying you're angry is not going to be the best way to do it, right? And I think this is my core belief, that men want to serve, men want to protect, and men want peace and for things to go well. I think that's the core thing. If we understand that, then one of the cues for me that has worked is, as we are asking men to be more vulnerable in their emotions and be more truthful in their emotions, I think, instead of trying to change a man or battle with them, for females to also use the same strategy of them showing their pain if it's hurtful. And I feel like that opens man to inquire. It takes a certain level of awareness and consciousness for a man to do that. But I feel like the best thing that a woman can do is also be true to her emotions. If an action from a man has hurt her, it's not serving him for her to cover it up, because then she's giving him cues that there's nothing wrong. And then one day she'll erupt and he'll be confused. But if it's at a moment-to-moment, genuine display of what she's feeling, a man can start to attune to that. Maybe I went overboard on that one, but that's really what landed for me. I mean, all yours.
I just wanted to pick up on the point of how do you make someone recognize there is an emotional issue? Well, there are always emotions, and the more suppressed they are, the bigger the issue becomes. But we go through life and things happen. We have bereavements, we have happy occasions, and that reflects in our emotions. That's the way things work. And very often, our emotions are a way of telling us about what is happening in our life that our conscious mind can't process easily. So the only emotional issue, if you were to take the word issue as just a nicer word for the word problem, the only emotional issue that I think exists is our lack of ability to maintain healthy emotions in the same way that we can have health issues by eating badly or not exercising or having stressful habits. It's pretty much the same thing. It's a general case of well-being and health. And it's just a process. It's how do you have certain practices and awarenesses that you practice and experience in life that make you better at this, in the same way you become better at managing your diet and your health and your exercise and other aspects in your life. And this is critical because underneath all our relationships is emotion. They govern everything, including our relationship with ourselves. So that's a key skill. So what I'd say is the concept of an emotional issue being there, the only real issue emotionally is the lack of ability to connect to and understand and be practiced in experiencing emotions and dealing with them. That's the issue. And it's about practice and learning rather than a specific problem that there's an emotional issue, it's going to get fixed and everything is going to be okay. Emotions will always be there. It's a process of learning of how to live, including how to live with emotions.
I love that. I really like that. So basically you're saying that the issue is not to recognize the emotions to start with, right? So this is where the issues start. And I think I've heard it, I'm hearing it today, of course, and I've heard it many times from friends and, family, talking about the men moving forward with life as if nothing happened. So an issue happens, a problem happens today, let's say at home. In 30 minutes, you find men asking their wife or their partner, what are we doing? Where are we going next? As if nothing happened. While to your point, it accumulates, and I think this is what over time, as a big picture, you end up dealing with a person, a man, since we're focusing on men, but it equally applies to both genders, who are not simply recognizing emotions. And this is where it really gets complex. So the origin of all, we go back, I think, to the self-awareness, the origin of all happiness, self-awareness. I have room for one more question. We over exceeded our usual time, but I don't feel like stopping. It's beautiful. I see Walid replied to, I don't know if you replied to Stefan or Nina.
Sandra asked a question. I thought it was a great one. Has depression found doubled? And it looks statistically, I was just writing it out, but I'll answer it. You can follow up. Statistically, we've seen a rise in our claims related to psychological disorders. So that could be depression and anxiety. I think Nancy also saw in the crisis hotline work she did over the last few months that there was definitely a rise in the need for mental health support related to anxiety. I don't know, Nancy, if you want to comment a bit more on that, but certainly the statistics say that it is there.
Oh, absolutely. Anxiety is the top issue in our portfolio. To your point, Andrew, we look at the data from our portfolio, which is a huge and representative sample of the Gulf region, particularly the UAE. We have seen men being the top adopters. Simply point, Michael, that men are the larger representative gender in the region. Anxiety being the top issue. More people coming and presenting with suicidal thoughts. To your point. On a side note here, I'm happy to see that this year in the UAE, the suicide is no longer considered as a self-crime, which was in the past. Don't quote me exactly on the wording, but something around that. COVID, I was just talking to a colleague actually this morning on a call, and he was like, Nancy, I feel that the end of the year has come, but the toll, although it should get smaller as a stress, I feel like it's reaching a peak this year. It's just like it's not stopping, and you feel that people are in a place where it's the peak, really. This year, of course, has been exceptional, but it just says a lot about our nature and the need for emotional connectedness. I think that the question that I was gonna share is Stefan's question around career. We all know that man and career, and of course, in the past few decades, women and career as well are becoming very intertwined in terms of their emotional well-being. I think Stefan's question was about how big a role does career play in men's emotional stability in your experience? I feel it's a defining factor of status, yet often the thing that it drives is absolute unhappiness. Let's wrap up with this one. How do you feel about career and happiness as men?
I'll start if you like. I think that they're so intertwined. As boys, we're told, we're asked the question, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I don't think anyone says, I'm going to be a happy man. They say I'm going to be this, an astronaut or a policeman or whatever it may be. So right from that early age, it's pushed on us. Your career is the most important thing. And I don't think our career should define us as who we are as a man. What defines me as a man is my heart, my soul, my love, how I exist in the world. That's what's important for me.
How do you, if you want, Michael, and I absolutely agree, but then there's the other thought of how do you map your social nature as a person to somehow feel the need to be socially engaged, right? So socially pleasing, let's say the existence of today's world. We live in a capitalistic world on average for the last 34 years. People have certain norms and expectations. It is not easy, let's admit it. It is not easy to overcome the ecosystem we grew up in. So how the question, I think, how can you balance that act between not necessarily having it to be exactly the only purpose of your happiness, as much as also the society and its pressure on you to be achieved? The $1,000,000 question.
Man, look, go ahead, Michael. Michael, finish up, and then I've got a comment on it.
Yeah, look, I really think we all need to be in careers that make us happy, that give us purpose, that provide some sense in life. And for my own journey, I started life as an accountant. I hated it. I had no idea what I wanted to be when I was 15, 16 years old. And it was the wrong career for me. So I really think if you can find the job that you feel comfortable in and gives you purpose and meaning, and don't worry about the dollars. And I know that's really hard because we've got to put food on the table, but then we start living a truer life. Andrew, what's your words of wisdom?
Yeah, very, very similar. I think it's a great question. And, I'm going to reflect on a question that my 15-year-old son asked me on the way to school. This was about a week ago. He said, Dad, I'm learning that people are forgotten about when they pass away in the world after the second generation. So imagine that, the grandfather, the great-grandfather, you're forgotten about unless you do something magnificent in the world. And I said, truly, if you are magnificent in the world, you'll be remembered for many years. I said, but keep in mind that the impact that you have on the people around you while you're living is more important. And so I often reflect on work and say, yes, there is the action of work that produces for the company, for the stakeholders, and ultimately for me to be able to feed my family. But then I say often, what is the purpose of the job that I'm doing? And I find peace in knowing that I'm impacting the lives of people around me and supporting them, whether that's my coworkers or whether that's my customers. And I think you have to get at that. Otherwise, you will find yourself on the wrong path mentally sooner or later.
Andrew, you got straight to the point, but also worth occasionally examining the question. So when we say career and happiness, it's either an and or an or the only way to be happy is to have the career, or if you don't have a good career, you won't be happy, or the only thing that matters in life is happiness. Sometimes framing the question itself could pose kind of questions that are difficult to answer and not helpful. But I think there is a lot more that would go into a fulfilling life than purely happiness. So a career can be hard. And there are times when you feel that it's tough, but it's still fulfilling. So I think it's expanding the meaning of the word happiness to something bigger matters. And I think on that point, talking about emotions, when we talk about emotions, sometimes some people put some as positive, not negative, and vice versa. Classic example is joy. Oh, if I have joy, I'm fine. The number of times, especially on social media, and there was a question about that, where people are simulating this joy and it's masking other things. So that's an emotion that people could feel, and it's actually not positive when it's in the wrong way or in the wrong emotion. It's just excessive. And sometimes anger is seen as it's always negative. Now, it's all about how it's expressed. People feel angry. It's a biological reaction to protect themselves, and it helps them realize they have boundaries. How they express that anger, how they control it is really what we're talking about. But it's a positive emotion, because if you never got angry, people would always get past your boundaries. Now, I didn't mean get angry by physically expressing it. By recognizing it internally, I'm not happy with the situation as this is something in my boundaries is being violated. I need to do something about it. If you didn't get that signal, or if that signal of fear you didn't get, we'll be jumping off buildings the whole time. So I think people mischaracterize emotions as positive or negative, but really what they need to be listening to is the message that they're giving them, and that's why it's important to listen to them.
Gentlemen, an hour and a half later, we still have 100 people with us. I'm really pleased, and I really thank you for everything you shared today. I heard a lot of words like empathy, like self-awareness, like, I don't know, purpose, transparency, vulnerability, a lot of them. Thank you for this very delightful and insightful talk. I do hope that we get the chance, either individually or as a group, to replicate this even beyond today. I would like to thank the many attendees that were with us today, that listened to us, that asked questions. And yes, we will share a recording publicly for today. I don't know if someone would like to sit and listen for an hour and a half, but I think it's very insightful. Any final thoughts from your side before we wrap up?
Okay.
I just want to say, everybody wants to talk.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you. And I also want to say, yeah, we're focused on men, and this is just as important for women, Women are just 50% of the population. My mother's a lovely woman, or was a lovely woman. So this is just as important for all humans, that we all just sit in this space and be real. And thank you so much for allowing us to share this today with everyone.
Yeah, you're not alone. We're all suffering from this. So get in touch and create a connection and start leading the kind of life that you want for yourself. Possible. It's not a figment of your imagination.
All right.
Put your mask on first.
The Corona mask.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Michael, Walid, Andrew, and Amin, thank you very much for today, and have a good rest of the day. Thanks.